Okay, we're going to begin our presentation. I'd like to welcome everybody to the ISO 9001-2015, Preparing for a Successful Transition. My name is Joseph Krolikowski, and I'm the Technical Director of Perry Johnson Registrars. Just a few technical notes. All participants are in mute. If you have a question, please utilize the question portion of the dashboard. We will make time for all of your questions. We'll absolutely be sure to answer your questions. I will mention that we do have an FAQ portion of our presentation today, where a number of the questions that were asked multiple times have been worked into the program itself. So perhaps some of your questions may be answered there, but we're glad to help with any questions that you have. Our topics for today, we're going to have a little bit of a review on where the standards come from, and an assessment on why the changes were so dramatic this time around. We're going to take a refreshed look at the timeline, do a deep dive into what the key changes are. We're going to review what I'm sure for many of you is a pressing question, and that is, do you have to overhaul your current system? We will review, as I said, the FAQs. I have some final points to make, and then we will get to your questions. The ISO is an acronym. It stands for the International Organization for Standardization, and their sole purpose is to write quality standards and other standards. They have ISO 9001, ISO 14001, and so forth. Now, each of those standards is assigned a technical committee, or TC. TC 176 is the committee that manages ISO 9001. TC 176 includes representation from each of the major industrialized nations and territories. The U.S. representation on TC 176 is taken from the American National Standards Institute. Now, you've probably heard that the changes were pretty far-reaching on this rewrite. There were a number of reasons for that. First of all, the ISO recognized that the needs of the industries that use ISO 9001 have evolved. Business has evolved. Business itself has evolved. And they want to see that ISO 9001 continues to be relevant, and they would like to obviously see it grow into new sectors and new industries. There's been a targeted effort on this occasion to simplify the language to try to promote understanding and consistency between auditors and even between certification bodies. And most importantly, what they wanted to achieve was improved cross-compatibility between standards. We're going to be learning a little bit later about the Annex SL and how that has had an impact on cross-compatibility between standards. Nigel Croft, who is the TC 176 chairperson, when the standard was nearing the end of the development process, he was asked, what are the key features that you want and that the committee wants ISO 9001 to have? And Nigel chose to answer that as follows. He said there's really three key features that we're trying to promote with how this standard has been written. First, that it continue to promote the idea of the process approach. Processes are, I'm sure for all of you, an important part of how you understand your quality system. The whole idea that we have processes that operate based on results. We have processes that try to provide consistency in what we do, and so forth. Secondly, and really based in the same core idea, ISO 9001 wants to continue to promote the idea of Plan, Do, Check, Act. The whole idea that processes operate best when they are planned, when there are actions and controls in place to make sure that the doing, if you will, is done properly, checks and balances on outputs, and then acting on lessons learned and feeding back into the planning phase. Now, the third key feature that Nigel mentioned, and the new idea, if you will, although as you're going to see, this really is not such a new idea, is the whole idea of risk-based thinking. And risk-based thinking, as you're going to see, is something that is intended to permeate the entire standard and in the entire quality system as well. Now, process approach and Plan, Do, Check, Act are not new ideas. They've been around for a long time, going all the way back to the 2000 version of ISO 9001. Risk-based thinking, in my opinion, is not so new either, but in terms of it being a phrase that's used within the standard and an idea that's intended to be understood, it is a new item. Let's take a look at the timeline such as it is now. We are nearing the end of a rather long-term process, so let's begin with an assessment of where we have come from. If you go all the way back to June of 2013, we saw the publication of the committee draft. The committee draft, for the most part, was intended for committee members only. It really wasn't a widely published document. A document that perhaps some of you got a look at the time it was out was the May 2014 published DIS, or Draft International Standard. Believe it or not, there were some companies that attempted to implement based on the DIS. That's rather aggressive thinking, but it was done. In July of 2015, we had the final Draft International Standard, or FDIS. This document, in our opinion, our estimation, was about 95% or more to the letter of what appeared in the final standard when that was published this past September. Looking ahead to September of 2018, the requirement is that any company that is ISO 9001-2008 certified and wishes to continue to be ISO 9001 certified will have successfully transitioned to the new standard. And so the new standard is here. It bears a publication date of September 15th, 2015. It is available for purchase in a variety of places, including the ISO. It represents the culmination of nearly 3.5 years of work, going all the way back to the issuance of Annex SL back in 2012. And as I said, the clock is ticking on ISO 9001-2008. By virtue of the 9001-2015 standard reflecting a publication date of September 15th, 2015, the official cutoff for 9001-2008 has been established as September 14th, 2018. Now, PJR, for its part, we've established an internal policy on the cutoff for 9001-2008 that is available in the FAQ document, which can be viewed on our website, www.pjr.com. In May of this year, our management team met to discuss the needed additional audit time to assess a company transitioning from 9001-2008 to 9001-2015. And we concluded that for most companies, a small amount of additional audit time would be sufficient. We are going to be advising our clients on a case-by-case basis what additional time will be needed. I'll mention also that we do have a separate webinar called Critical Points of Review that addresses this point as well and goes into a little bit more detail. That webinar will be presented again next week, and you should be receiving a notice related to that. As to the key changes, it's important, I think, to start with the acknowledgement of Annex SL. Annex SL, you may have heard referred to as the high-level outline, the Annex XL. It is, as the name implies, an annex, and it is an annex of a much larger ISO publication called Directives Part 1, Consolidated ISO Supplement Procedure Specific to ISO. Directives Part 1 is a self-imposed standard. The ISO imposes it on itself, and it's all about a standard on how to write standards. And it's actually something that you can view for free. I do have the link here if you're interested in looking at it. And it covers all of the various phases that standards go through, the draft phase, the final draft phase, and so forth. So Annex SL is a portion of that document. It was written in 2012 by a special committee, and what Annex SL represents is a 10-section blueprint for authorship of the ISO family of standards. It promotes common terms, core definition, even measures of the text, the actual words to be used in the standard, are provided. Now the plan is that the Annex SL structure will be rolled out to all of the ISO standards by 2016 or 2017. Now, of course, recognize that's a lot of standards, and that means that it's going to take some time. Some folks that are participants on one committee participate in multiple committees and so forth, but this is the intent, that in a day not too far from now, we're going to have every single standard with the same core structure. And what is that core structure? It is a 10-section approach, and we're going to kind of go through the highlights right now. Sections 1, 2, and 3 really are no different conceptually than how they are in the 9001-2008 standard. In scope, we have a discussion of who does the standard apply to, what's the intent. Normative reference provides a mention of the ISO 9000 document, which is the Fundamentals and Vocabulary Standard, and then terms and definitions. And it's interesting to note that terms and definitions, such as it is right now, is a section really without content. All of the terms and definitions used in the standard are the ones that are provided in ISO 9000. The auditable portion of the standard begins in Section 4, which is called Context of the Organization. And there's a couple of high-level important items that are discussed here. We talk about what is the organization, what are the needs and expectations of interested parties, and the understanding is that interested parties refers to both folks inside the organization and folks outside the organization. What is the scope of the system? What are the processes that make it up? In Section 5, we have a clause called Leadership and Commitment. There's some familiar items here: customer focus, quality policy. How do we define responsibility and authority? In Section 6, we have planning, and there's three primary pieces here. We have the risk-based thinking / risk management item here, quality objectives, and planning to achieve them, and then an overall section called planning of changes. Section 7 is called support, and there's a number of pieces here. This is actually where you'll find the calibration requirements, measurement device requirements are here, competency is here, internal communication is here, the new term documented information is here, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. So what you have, if you take 4, 5, 6, and 7 together, what you have are the pieces that make up the foundation, if you will, of an effective quality management system. And the whole idea that if an organization is going to be successful, it has to have these foundation pieces in place. That in turn gives way to Section 8, which is called operation. Now I want you to think of Section 8 operation in much the same way that we currently think of ISO 9001-2008 Section 7, product realization. Operation refers to all of the day-to-day activities that an organization goes through. You think about selling the product and designing the product and external provided processes, that's purchasing, controlling your production process. All of those core key activities, those are all found here in Section 8. And it's interesting to note that for the most part, what's required by the standard for these core activities is really not all that different from what was required in 9001-2008. Now, of course, we'll be covering that in a bit. The auditable portion of the standard then concludes with Sections 9 and 10, which are called performance evaluation and improvement. And these two sections taken together, they kind of represent the how are we going to monitor how well our system is doing, what are we going to do about it if we find issues, and again, a lot of familiar pieces here. Customer satisfaction, internal audit. This is now the new home for management review. Corrective action is here. Continual improvement is here as well. Let's dig a little deeper now into the key changes and try to highlight some of the key new content. Let's start with risk. I know this is kind of a scary item for some folks, and among other things, I want to put you at ease in terms of what's expected and how this is to be viewed. The term risk, risk is used a total of 16 times in the auditable portion of the standard. It's also used several times in the appendices and in the preface sections. Now, the idea with risk is that it's a system-wide strategy. For those of you that have been certified long enough that you remember what it was like to transition to the 2000 version of ISO 9001, you'll remember that the new idea then was continual improvement. And the way that we explained it was that continual improvement was not a handful of projects that you work on for a couple hours a month and put away. It was something that was intended to be system-wide, and it represented a philosophy, really. Well, that's the way that the writers of the standard want you to view risk management and risk-based thinking, which really those two terms are viewed interchangeably. The idea that we incorporate risk-based thinking into our existing processes, and we seek to avoid risk wherever possible. Now let's look at the actual verbiage, because this I think is going to help illustrate where they're going with this requirement. The primary clause for risk is 6.1, and under 6.1 there's two subclauses. In 6.1.1 it states that when you're planning for the system, you need to consider the issues that are referred to in 4.1. Now in that context they're talking about both external issues, which may be things, customer complaints and supplier changes and so forth, as well as internal issues. Those are going to be things that are raised by your employees, things between departments and so forth. Okay, so consider the issues and the requirements referred to in 4.2. Now the reference to 4.2 here is the context of interested parties, and again that's both internal and external interested parties. So okay, so issues and requirements, and determine then the risks and opportunities. And I do want to emphasize the fact that the standard mentions both risks and opportunities. And the idea is that there's multiple ways of viewing this. The idea that it's good to avoid bad things, right? and that's where subclause C talks about prevent or reduce undesired effects. But it's also desirable to take advantage of good things. And that's where subclause B comes in, enhancing desirable effects. Now, both of those things taken together are going to help you do A and D. These efforts should give assurance that the system can do what it's supposed to do and also to achieve improvement. So this is not just avoid the bad stuff. This is let's recognize when something is working well and perhaps roll that out in a larger effort. Now the second clause here, 612, it continues and it says you need to then plan actions to address the risks and opportunities. And you need to figure out, and this verbiage is key, how to integrate and implement those actions into your processes. So right here you'll note they're saying use your existing processes. This is not necessarily something that needs to be off by itself. This needs to be an ingrained part of your current processes, and then evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. Actions to address risks and opportunities need to be proportionate to the potential impact on the conformity of products and services. So there's a lot going on here, but the big picture is avoid bad stuff and take advantage of good stuff when it happens, and to utilize your existing processes. Now, one of the things that I get asked a lot, well, what are we doing that's going to already correlate to this? How is this going to potentially work with what we might already be doing? And in our view, there are 4 key areas in 9001-2008 that correlate to risk management. Let's begin with 5.6, management review. Management review is an assessment of the quality system. And you'll no doubt recall that one of the intended outputs of management review is improvement. So naturally, we can point to management review as a form of risk management or risk-based thinking. 722, review of requirements related to the product. Assessing customer expectations against what you are currently capable of doing, and resolving discrepancies, and doing all this sort of before you've jumped in the lake, so to speak, and to make sure that we mutually understand everything up front. Absolutely a form of risk-based thinking. Training, as it's defined in 622, or competency. Taking a look at what your needs are for competency and providing what's necessary to achieve that competency. Absolutely a form of risk-based thinking. And then perhaps most directly, preventive action. And the whole idea of having a special activity to assess potential problems and then take action to avoid those issues. Continuing on with the key changes, there have been some important changes in terminology. The phrases procedures, records, and documents, they've all been eliminated from the standard, and they've been replaced with a term called documented information. Now, I do want to identify and acknowledge a clarification that's provided in the annex of the standard, Annex A6. It talks about documented information, and it points out the use of the phrases maintain and retain. So let's talk about that for just a second. Maintain documented information is understood to be a replacement for references to documents, procedures, quality manual, and so forth. Now, there's a handful, really, of items that are listed as maintain documented information. One example of that is Section 4.3. 4.3 requires that the scope of the system be documented. So it says you will maintain documented information regarding the scope. Now, retained documented information is a replacement for past references to record. Now, there's obviously numerous points in the standard where records or retained documented information is required. And one good example of this is clause 9.3.3, which requires records of management review be retained. Additionally, all references to the term product now read products and services. This has been the case for some time already. If you read Section 3 of 9001-2008, you'll note that it says wherever the term product appears, it can also mean service. The standard is pushing the idea of 9001 being applicable to multiple types of business, both those with and those without a tangible product. Management responsibility has become leadership, and leadership is this is an important change kind of in concept and how this term is understood. The idea that management leads by example and involvement rather than simply directing that activities be performed. The whole idea that it's a leadership team. We're going to dig into this in just a little bit here in the presentation. Continual improvement has evolved. It's part of a larger section now called improvement. And this promotes the idea that continual improvement is not the only aspect of improvement that's intended. You can think about breakthroughs, reactive changes, reorganizations. These are also forms of improvement. Continual improvement, when viewed correctly, is part of a larger improvement strategy. Suppliers are to be understood as external providers. This is another item where we have an annex explaining a bit what's meant. And in A8, the explanation that's given is that that term, external providers, is to include a number of folks, suppliers, but also associate companies and outsourcing. We definitely feel this is a beneficial change. It pools the requirements in a single clause, and it emphasizes the importance of the organization's responsibility to manage external providers that have an impact on the quality system. ISO 9001-2015 has eliminated a number of things that were required in 9001-2008. These include quality manual, procedures, and there is no mention of work instructions. Now, the implication here is that an organization could theoretically achieve certification without those items. Now, as we're going to be re-emphasizing a little bit later, this does not mean that you need to immediately discard your quality manual and procedures. Because, among other things, you're still going to be expected to demonstrate that your processes are consistent and effective. Now, if you can do so without a procedure or quality manual, that's fine, but if the procedures and quality manual that you have are contributing in a positive way to the consistency and effectiveness of your processes, then by all means, you should retain them. The title management representative has been eliminated from the standard. And the implication of this is not that the responsibilities have been eliminated, but rather that those functions now fall to top management itself. The idea that leadership needs to lead, leadership needs to be involved in the system and take responsibility for it. Now, this does not mean that an organization can't appoint a key person, but the management of the system cannot be solely that person's responsibility. Now, for a lot of companies, this is already how things are done. The phrase permissible exclusions has been removed, and in its place, and this is interesting, they have indicated that a company can claim a non-applicable from any portion of the 9001-2015 standard. Now, just as before, you still have to demonstrate that the non-applicable is warranted, that it's justified. We are having a difficult time identifying much of anything outside of Section 8, with some possible exceptions from Section 7, but really anything from 4 through 6 or 9 and 10 where it would make sense or you could explain a justification to claim it as a non-applicable. Doesn't mean it can't be done, it just means that we've had some difficulty identifying where it might be feasible and appropriate. From your vantage point, in terms of how this will be audited, no change, and indeed your current method of identifying your exclusions will very likely be brought to bear for identifying your non-applicables. Let's talk a little bit about the term interested parties. This is an Annex SL based term, and let's start with how it's defined. A person or organization that can affect, be affected by, or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision or activity. And they give some rather interesting examples. They talk about customers, okay, ownership, fine, people within the organization, and suppliers, with you so far. Then you get to bankers, unions, partners, competitors. Not what you traditionally think of when you think of input to a quality management system. But again, depending on what your scope of business is, depending on what the scope of your system is, these might be absolutely appropriate interested parties. Now in 4.2, there's an important clarifier that I want you to bear in mind, and that is that it is up to the organization to determine who their interested parties are. And also it goes on to state relevant to the quality management system. So this is something that you will have to be able to explain in the context of your organization. Who are the interested parties that have an impact on what it is that you do? Obviously, the term is intended to broaden the scope of who we understand those requirements is coming from, but in practice, really, this is not going to require a whole lot of additional implementation activity. What we're saying is make sure you're cognizant of the requirement, make sure you understand how it applies to you. Let's have a look now at clause by clause some key changes that have been promoted by the standard. Sections 1 through 3, as I said, are not auditable as before. In Section 4, some key new questions that are being raised. What purpose does this organization serve? Who does it exist for? Who are the interested parties? Can we claim any part of the standard as non-applicable? In Section 5, the leadership clause, we talk about, is a leadership structure evident? Has leadership made itself accountable for the effectiveness of the system? Has leadership made sure that the quality policy and objectives are consistent with the strategic direction of the company? Has the policy been made available to interested parties? And has the quality system been integrated into business processes? I want to take a minute to discuss the phrase strategic direction. This is a phrase that there has been a great deal of confusion about, and I've recently gotten what I feel is some good clarity on this. When the standard talks about strategic direction, what it refers to is the larger mission of the organization, the vision that the organization has for the future. Most companies have an idea of where they want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. The intent of using the phrase strategic direction within the standard is to emphasize that your quality policy, your objectives, those items, the goals that you've set, they should be consistent with the intended trajectory of the company, the intended strategic direction of the company. I know in the past there's been some discussion about, does this mean we're going to be looking at financial records and so forth? It's really got nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that whatsoever. ISO 9001 has never been a standard that looked at accounting books, and that's still very much the case. This last bullet here about integration into business processes. A couple of manifestations that we see from this include things like the document control practices, records control practices, competency, and so forth. These are ways that a quality system can integrate into business processes without looking at your financial books. That aspect of it will never change. Section 6, planning for the system. Planning when viewed in the context of risk-based thinking. Have we considered our risks? Have we taken actions for risks and opportunities? And then as it relates to quality objectives, do we know who's responsible, what the target date is, what it is we're trying to accomplish? Are these objectives relevant to conformity of products and enhancement of customer satisfaction? Okay, Section 7 is called support. A lot of familiar content in here from Section 6. Some bits and pieces from 4 and 5. One slightly new area of content that's in here is in Section 7.1.6, which is part of a larger idea called organizational knowledge. And the new idea is, if things are changing for the organization, have we figured out how we can be ready for what's coming, changing needs and trends against the current competency base? There's really no other significant new content that hasn't been present in some form already. Section 8, operation. Our conclusion is that there is no significant new content here that hasn't been present in some form already in 9001-2008. That's also the case for Section 9. Although Section 9 is now where management review is found, it's been coupled with some of the other like-minded activities. And that's also the case for Section 10. No significant new content. So as I've hopefully made clear, the changes to the standard are minimal and manageable. Even risk is not such a new idea if you consider that preventive action and the other activities that we looked at have been a part of the 9001 standard since it was first published. Now let's kind of do a cover-to-cover analysis of the standard and make sure that we are able to kind of view what these sections are about and what purpose they serve. In section 0.1, we have kind of a generalized introduction. It gives an overview statement, discusses a bit of what the standard is intended to benefit, a preliminary discussion on risk-based thinking, unplanned do check act, and it provides an explanation of 4 key terms. Only 3 of which are actually used in the standard. And the first of these is shall. And obviously, for those of you that are experienced in working with ISO, you'll recognize that shall indicates a mandatory requirement. Anything in the standard that starts with the word shall means you have to do it. Should is viewed as a recommendation, and there's actually no uses of the term should within the auditable portion of the standard, which is completely appropriate, of course. And then we have these new terms, may and can. May indicates a permission. That term actually appears once, and then can indicates a possibility or capability, numerous instances. Our feeling on this is that in terms of how to implement your system, the term that you most want to pay attention to, of course, is going to be shall. In section 0.2, we are introduced to the 7 quality management principles, and the reader is then referred to the 9000 standard for a more full explanation of those terms. In section 0.3, process approach, there is a reinforcement of the importance of the process approach and an improved graphic. PDCA is then shown as integrated with each of the sections of the standard. So it kind of reinforces how the standard itself follows PDCA thinking. In 033, we have another more elaborate discussion of risk-based thinking, defining it and explaining its importance. And in 0.4, we have an identified relationship with the support standards, the 9000 and 9004. We've already covered sections 1, 2, and 3, but again, just some further notes on what those sections are all about and what the content is. We've reviewed 4 and 10 as well, so let's begin a discussion of the annexes. There's a lot of content in Annex A that I think for the average organization is going to be particularly helpful. And helpful in terms of, you know, at times, and I'm sure some of you have had this happen, an organization and their auditor can be at an impasse in terms of how to correctly understand a requirement. And, you know, oftentimes you have to reach out to the registrar for a clarification. The writers of the standard have anticipated this with some of the terminology. And so the annex, I think, is intended to help provide some clarity. So let's begin with Annex A1. It's called Structure and Terminology, and it basically states that an organization does not have to align their documentation to match ISO 9001. You don't have to have a Section 4 procedure, a Section 5 procedure. You don't even have to use the specific terms that are found in the standard. For example, if you want to continue to refer to them as suppliers, there's no reason that you would have to then start calling them external providers, just because that's the term that the standard uses. In Section A2, products and services, a little bit of an explanation given on why the term products and services was introduced into the standard as a replacement for the term product. In A3, we have an explanation of what is meant by interested parties, and it kind of rolls in the official definition. Risk-based thinking gets another explanation in Section A4, and it's emphasized that you don't have to have a formal structure for it. Hopefully we've demonstrated already how you can incorporate risk-based thinking and risk management into your day-to-day activities. Annex A5 talks about the logic for removing the phrase permissible exclusions from the standard, provides some explanation on the concept of non-applicables. Documented information is discussed in A6. We took a look at that earlier, the whole idea of maintained and retained. Organizational knowledge is discussed in A7. This is a kind of an interesting idea. We have a deeper dive into this in my other webinar, but think of organizational knowledge as knowledge that is gained through experience. And the A7 is meant to give some clarity on that. And then finally, control of externally provided products and services. And that's another one that we've looked at already in terms of what's meant by the term external providers. Annex B is a further discussion on the relationship between 9001 and other publications, and the standard concludes with a bibliography. Now, as to whether or not you have to overhaul your system, the short answer to this is no. You do not have to overhaul your system. One of the goals of the committee, as we've mentioned, was to improve the inclusiveness of the standard. If you tell over 1 million worldwide certified companies that they have to overhaul their system, that's not inclusive. So this has been handled very delicately in terms of rolling out these requirements in such a way that they add value and improve the standard, but without forcing existing companies to do significant amounts of overhaul. And among other things, we want to emphasize the idea of if it works, keep it. If your quality manual fits your business, if your procedures are effective, If you use them and they help you do things consistently, absolutely keep your quality manual, keep your procedures. That's also true for your quality policy, for your current quality objectives. So long as those items are adding value to what you're doing and they're rooted in the idea of conformity of product and satisfaction of customers, there should be no reason that those ideas, those items, should have to change. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some FAQs that I think are going to perhaps answer some of your questions. Let's have a look at those. Will our staff have to complete transition training? Now, depending on the extent of revisions that you're going to make to your system, you may need to provide some extensive training. But the short answer to this question is yes. You do have to provide some form of transition training. At minimum, you need to provide awareness training. You need to make your staff aware that your organization is transitioning to a new version of the standard. And you need to have assessed how that's going to impact current processes and current personnel. Now, obviously, for the majority of your staff, there's going to be no real impact from the new standard. People that are running machines, people that are inspecting parts, people that are driving trucks and delivering product. Those folks are not going to see anything different from this standard, but we still need to make sure that they're aware that a transition is being performed. Now, what about our internal auditors? Do they have to complete transitional training? Internal auditing, what you have to remember about internal auditing is that it's viewed in the same light as any other competency within the system. And that is that when it comes to competency, you, the organization, are responsible for determining what it means to be competent. So if you have auditors on your staff that have worked for you for many years, they understand your processes, they understand how to audit your company, it's entirely conceivable that they could do a period of self-study and be ready to audit the new standard. Now, as has been the case before, the competency of your auditors is going to be judged by the effectiveness of your audits. So you will have to proceed based on, it is kind of a risk analysis. How much training do I have to give my current auditors for them to confidently audit the new standard? That's a decision that you will have to make on a case-by-case basis. But there is no preconceived expectation in regards to auditor competency. We've been asked, of course, on what's going on with the other standards, TS 16949, TL 9000, AS 9100. We know that each of them is in the midst of an update. We know that 2016 is what's being targeted for publication for those standards. We also know, interestingly, that ISO 13485, which is the medical device standard, is actually not going to continue to align with 9001. They are planning to go their own way, and they are planning to align more with the FDA 820 requirements. So I don't know if we have anyone on the call today that is a 13485 certified company, but you can expect that those requirements, when published, will be different than the 9001 requirements in terms of structure, numbering, and so forth. Should we get certified now or wait? Perhaps we have some folks on the call today that are in the midst of implementing a new quality system, and you're wondering, well, should we certify to 9001-2008, or should we implement 9001-2015? It's important for you to make the decision yourself, of course, but bear in mind a couple of key things. Number one, ISO 9001:2015 is a brand new standard for everybody, and that includes the auditors. Now, we already, here at PJR, we have auditors that are ready to audit the new standard. We are certifying more auditors to audit the new standard every day. So we have the resources, the workbooks have been written, we can absolutely accommodate you. But it's still a new standard, and it's still a new standard that we as auditors and as a registrar are getting fully comfortable with. So if you have spent a good deal of time implementing ISO 2008, perhaps there is value for you in having a year of certification under the 2008 standard and then transitioning. And transitioning at a point when the auditors and the registrar have had a chance to have some more field experience with the new standard. Points to bear in mind. As to what steps can you take right now? The IAF ID9 provides a 7-step process, good steps to follow in terms of transition. First, acquire and review the 9001:2015 standard. Identify any gaps that need to be addressed. Write up an action plan. Assign responsibilities for those actions. Update your documents if necessary to reflect any new or revised processes. Provide awareness and transition training to your staff. Complete a full system internal audit followed by a management review. Implement your corrective actions for any internal audit findings, and then finally coordinate with PJR or your certification body. I do want to make one final attempt at emphasizing the impact on documentation, quality manual, and procedures. If you use these items, there's absolutely no reason that you should get rid of them just because ISO 9001:2015 doesn't require them. If renumbering them makes them work better for you, then do so, but it's not going to be mandatory. We also ask that you work with your auditors. We're counting on your auditors to be able to provide you with expert analysis of how your standard stacks up against the revised criteria. We feel that your auditor is going to be a valuable resource to you. We feel that 9001:2015 is a beneficial update to the standard. We will continue to provide you with updates on this transition process and make sure that your transition is as smooth as it can possibly be. I want to give you a couple of quick updates on the support standards. The 9000 standard, as I've referenced a couple of times, was published new in September of 2015. It contains all the sanction definitions, the 7 management principles, and a set of concept diagrams that show the intended interrelationship of ideas. As was the case before, it is not a certifiable standard, but it is perhaps something that you may find useful. 9004 is remaining at the 2009 revision for now. We've heard some rumors, some talk that 9004 is perhaps being considered for update, but as of right now, the 2009 revision applies. And 19011, the auditing guidance standard, for now, is also to remain at its current revision, 2011. We have a lot of resources for you on our website. We've got a side-by-side comparison between 9001, 2008, 2015, and we've also got the FAQ report, including the FAQs that we covered today during our presentation. Both of those items are found on our website, www.pjr.com. We do want you to also join us for some of our other webinars. As I mentioned, we have 9001 2015 critical points of review during the transition audit process. And that's also given on a once monthly basis. This is a deep dive into the new areas represented by the standard and how they'll be assessed. I apologize for the typo. That should say debuting next week. We will be presenting the interaction of processes and its importance to a successful audit. This is going to be a review of the critical topic of processes and how to correctly understand them. Again, that is next week. We'll be delivering both of these webinars. We do want to keep in touch with you, and so I do encourage you to, again, visit our website. And at the bottom of the page, please input your email address and click subscribe. We'll keep you informed of all upcoming webinars and other points of important information. I do thank you for your time, and I'm going to go ahead and expand the question dashboard and see what kind of questions we've got today. Okay, we're getting some questions about viewing this presentation later. Absolutely, we will make the presentation available to you for viewing and reviewing. That'll be shortly after we've concluded here. Can an ISO certified company certify a non-certified supplier? That's a question raised by Mr. Ron Miller. Mr. Miller, in terms of certifying, official certification, no. However, an organization can absolutely have a process for designating suppliers, for designating key suppliers even, but certification is something that only an official certification body is in a position to offer. Okay, we have a question from Robert Collier, Jr. Would a regulatory agency be considered an interested party? Possibly. If the regulatory agency provides impact to quality system processes, again, remember that the standard talks about determined by the organization as relevant. So I would say possibly. Okay, Steve McGlynn asks, on the next audit performed by PJR, will the auditor be able to consult us on what steps we need to take to comply with the new 2015 standard? I wouldn't say so much that they would consult, but what they would be able to do is to point out the areas where your quality system is inconsistent with the new requirements of the standard. I would certainly say that your auditor would be able to do that. Okay. Linda Jones asks, since the requirement for a quality manual is no longer in effect, would it be feasible from an audit standpoint to incorporate processes into a quality manual instead of having separate processes? Absolutely. Linda, remember that this documentation is intended to serve your organization first and foremost. And so accordingly, whether you call it a quality manual or a management system manual or a company handbook or whatever it is you want to refer to it as, it needs to serve your purposes first. So if incorporating process flows or process procedures into a quality manual is more value added for you, absolutely you should feel free to do so. And for what it's worth, it's actually something that you're permitted to do already in 9001-2008. There is no provision that says they have to be separate items. Okay, Jody Roberts asks, I need to complete lead auditor training. Should I do the 2008 or 2015 course? At this phase, Jody, it would probably make the most sense to pursue a 2015 auditor course, but bear in mind that lead auditor training, for the most part, trains you on how to be an auditor. It does not train you on the standard itself, so just bear that in mind. Okay, Rexy Pena asks, will we receive confirmation of attendance? I'm afraid that is something that we don't specifically provide through the webinars. Okay, any further questions? Okay, James Gossard asks, since 1345 will be diverging from the Annex SL structure, will combined audits no longer be available? James, the answer to that is no. I don't think that the audits will have to be separate, forced to be separate. I'm sure that there would be a way for us to be able to accommodate a combined audit. I don't see that as an issue whatsoever. Okay. Getting some nice feedback. I'm pleased that the webinar was found to be beneficial. Okay. Jane Birkenstock asks, do we teach internal auditor training? I ask because the standard appears to be unauditable for a newbie auditor. PJR itself does not provide internal auditor training, but we can definitely put you in touch with some folks who do. Jane, if you want to email the organizer, we can get some information out to you. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to conclude our training. I want to wish all of you a happy holiday season, and thank you for your attendance.